And the thing is, nobody ever told me that being broke isn't just a bank balance problem. It's a thinking problem. And I didn't figure that out until I was already in my mid-20s, sitting in a parking lot outside a grocery store, doing the math in my head before I went inside. Not because I was budgeting, because I genuinely didn't know if my card would go through. I'm Adam, and this video isn't about getting rich quick. It's about something that took me way longer to understand, that the way you think about money when you didn't grow up with it is fundamentally different from the way someone who did grow up with it thinks. And that gap, that invisible gap between the two, is probably costing you more than any bad investment ever could. There's a concept in behavioral economics called financial socialization. Basically, it means the money habits and beliefs you carry as an adult were mostly installed in you before you were 12 years old. Not by school, not by some finance class, by watching your parents. And here's what that looks like in practice. Some kids grow up watching their dad flip through statements at the kitchen table, calmly moving money between accounts, talking out loud about what's going to the mortgage, what's going to savings, what they're going to invest in next quarter. They don't even know it's happening. They're just absorbing it. By the time they're 22, they have a mental model for money management that they didn't even consciously build. Other kids, and this was me, grow up in a house where money is either absent or a source of tension. You don't see accounts being reviewed. You see bills getting shuffled to the bottom of a pile. You see your parents go quiet when the topic comes up. You learn very early that money is either something you don't have or something you don't talk about. And that silence does more damage than most people realize, because what fills the silence is usually fear. I used to think the people who seemed confident about money were just smarter than me, or luckier. It took me years to understand they weren't. They just grew up with a different rule book, one that nobody handed me. And realizing it wasn't your fault you didn't know, that's a strange kind of relief, like putting down something heavy you didn't know you were carrying. Okay, so everyone talks about scarcity mindset like it's a personality flaw. Like if you just fix your thinking, boom, abundance follows. And I used to nod along to that advice before I understood what scarcity mindset actually is, biologically. Here's what's actually happening. When you grow up in an environment where money is unpredictable, where sometimes there's enough and sometimes there isn't, your brain develops what researchers call cognitive tunneling. You get extremely good at solving the immediate problem in front of you. Pay the rent, feed the family, get through this month. That tunnel focus is actually adaptive. It helped your parents survive. It helped you survive. The problem is, tunneling burns bandwidth. And when your mental bandwidth is consumed by immediate survival, you have less left over for long-term thinking. This isn't a character flaw. This is a documented cognitive load effect from studies done at Princeton and Harvard. People who are under resource constraints score lower on IQ tests, not because they're less intelligent, but because part of their processing power is already occupied. I'm going to say that again because I didn't believe it the first time I heard it. Being under financial stress temporarily lowers your cognitive performance. Not permanently, temporarily. But the people making financial decisions under that stress are not operating at full capacity, and society judges those decisions without knowing that. Lewis said something to me once, and I'm not going to pretend it was deep, because at the time it annoyed me. He said, "Bro, poor people make expensive decisions." And I almost argued with him, but he wasn't wrong. He was just missing the reason. Payday loans, overdraft fees, buying cheap things that break and have to be replaced 3 times. These aren't dumb choices. They're the result of a brain that's been trained to solve problems right now with what's available right now. The long-term math literally doesn't fit in the window. When you understand that, you stop blaming yourself and you start asking different questions. I need to stay on something for a second before we get to the practical stuff, because everyone wants to jump to, okay, so what's the strategy? What do I invest in? What's the first step? And that'll get there. But the number of people I've seen follow a perfectly logical financial plan and then quietly sabotage it 6 months later because of something they never dealt with emotionally, it's not small. There's a version of this that happened to me with a savings account. I opened one when I was 24, set up an automatic transfer, $50 a week, and for about 3 months it worked fine. Then I hit a rough patch, nothing catastrophic, just a slow month at work, and I transferred the savings back into my current account, and then I never rebuilt the habit. And I told myself a story about why that made sense, but honestly, part of me didn't believe I deserved to have savings. Part of me was waiting for something to go wrong that would justify taking it back. There's a psychological pattern where people who grew up without money unconsciously recreate that state as adults. Not because they want to be broke, obviously they don't, but because their nervous system has been calibrated to treat having nothing as the normal baseline. Having money sitting in an account can actually feel unstable, like it's only a matter of time before it disappears. So why not spend it on your own terms before circumstances take it from you? This isn't weird. This isn't broken. This is a normal response to an abnormal childhood environment. But it is something you need to know about yourself before you can work around it. The moment you catch yourself spending not because you want something, but because having feels unsafe, that's the moment everything starts to shift. So there's this study, I think it was out of the University of Michigan, where they looked at lottery winners 5 years after winning, and the finding that always gets cited is that most of them return to their prior wealth level within a few years. People use it to say money doesn't buy happiness, but that's not the interesting part to me. The interesting part is why. And the reason most researchers point to is that the winner's financial behavior didn't change. Their money increased dramatically. Their relationship with money didn't. Same spending patterns, same avoidance of planning, same discomfort with investing. Just more zeros temporarily. Now, before I say what I'm about to say, I want to be clear. I used to think that budgeting was for people who couldn't control themselves, like it was a crutch. You either had discipline or you didn't, and I had enough willpower to manage without a system. I was wrong about that, completely wrong. And I say that as someone who spent 3 years being wrong about it and losing money in the process. Willpower is not a substitute for systems. Willpower is finite. It depletes over the course of a day. Every decision you make, including totally unrelated ones, draws from the same cognitive reservoir. By the time you're tired on a Friday night and you see that thing you've been vaguely wanting to buy, your decision-making capacity is already half empty. Systems don't get tired. What this looks like in practice is automatic transfers the day your paycheck lands. Before you see the number, before your brain gets attached to it, a percentage moves somewhere you don't look at. Not a huge amount. Start with whatever doesn't make you anxious. The dollar amount matters less than the habit of it happening without you having to decide every single time. This is especially important when you grew up broke, because I'll transfer to savings when I have extra doesn't work for a brain that's been trained to see any balance above zero as extra. The surplus evaporates, not because you're irresponsible, because your baseline is calibrated to a different set point. Automation removes the decision, and removing the decision removes the fight between your current self and your financially programmed childhood self. There is no willpower battle if the transfer happens before the option exists. Same with investing. You don't have to understand every mechanism of how the market works before you start. You actually don't. You just have to start before you feel ready, because the feeling of readiness never arrives on its own. There's something quietly radical about money moving out of your account toward your future without you having to be brave about it every single time. Okay, I want to say something here that's a little uncomfortable. Most personal finance content, including a lot of the content on this channel, is framed around spending less, saving better, investing smarter. And all of that matters. But there's a ceiling on how far that gets you if your income doesn't grow. You cannot budget your way to wealth. Full stop. Cutting expenses matters up to a point. After that point, the only lever left is income. And growing up broke often comes with a deeply embedded belief that your income is fixed, that you're at the mercy of whoever's paying you, that asking for more or building something of your own is for people who had more opportunities than you did. I genuinely believed that for years. Not consciously, I wouldn't have said it if you asked me, but it was running underneath everything. The reason I didn't negotiate my first few salaries. The reason I dismissed side income ideas as too risky, too unreliable. My brain was protecting me from the embarrassment of wanting more and not getting it by making sure I never clearly wanted more in the first place. Wanting is dangerous when you grew up in an environment where wanting was routinely disappointed. But here's what I've learned, and this is still uncomfortable for me to say: you have to decide that your income is a variable, not something that happens to you, something you have a hand in determining. That doesn't mean quit your job tomorrow. It means start building something on the side, even slowly, even imperfectly. Because every dollar that doesn't come from a single source is a dollar that starts to rewire the belief that you're financially helpless. The first time money came in from something you built, even $20, even $10, something in your chest changes. A small door opens that you didn't know was closed. All right, so this is slightly embarrassing. For a long time, I'm talking a couple of years, I had this resistance to talking about money with people I respected. Like, not financial advisors, I mean friends, peers, people roughly my age who were figuring things out at the same time I was. And I resisted it because growing up, money conversations felt like exposing weakness. If you talked about money in my house, it usually meant something was wrong. Lewis has always been the opposite. He'll bring it up at dinner. He'll ask people directly what they're paying for rent, what they're putting into savings, what they think about a particular investment. And for a while, I found it embarrassing, like he had no filter. But, and I cannot believe I'm saying this out loud, he was right and I was wrong. There's actual research on this. People who talk openly about money with their peers make significantly better financial decisions over time. Not because the conversations are always useful, sometimes they're genuinely not, but because the conversations normalize thinking about money as a topic you engage with, rather than a topic that just happens to you. The silence I grew up with kept money mystified, and mystified things stay scary. Lewis treating money like a normal subject, casually, without drama, slowly made it a normal subject to me too. That took longer than it should have, but it happened. If you made it here, I want to say something that isn't advice. Growing up without money, or in a house where money was a source of stress, or silence, or shame, that shapes you in ways that go way deeper than not knowing what an index fund is. It gets into how you feel about the future, whether you believe you're allowed to have one, whether you trust that good things, once they arrive, will stay. And I don't think you fix that with a spreadsheet. I think you fix it slowly, over time, by making enough small decisions that contradict the story you inherited about what you're capable of. By putting $50 somewhere your childhood self doesn't have access to. By having one honest conversation about money you would have avoided before. By noticing, just noticing, when the fear kicks in and letting it be there without letting it decide for you. You're not behind. You started with a different map. That's not the same thing. I'm Adam. I'll see you in the next one.